Okay, I'm ready to start in a few seconds. And we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And today's episode is going to cover some questions that you want to know more about medical marijuana. And right now I'm going to be joining with Dr. Kumar. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, I'm going to
Yeah, sure.
record on my Headliner app. How are
I'm
you?
doing well. Thank you.
And let me tweet out some of the links that you shared with
Yeah.
me. Okay. Yeah, the first one you sent me, I was looking on that too. That was really, because medical marijuana, I mean, there's such a long history in the state of Florida. It took us so long to get medical marijuana approved.
Yep. Yep. A hard won battle, but we still have a few ways to go.
Oh, yeah, we still have a lot. Here we go. I'm looking for the space so I can go ahead and copy the link. That my app logged me out, so I can't start because I want to. The snippets are really important to me. It's part of the storytelling, and it's like always logging me out. How's your week going?
Good. Good. Staying busy.
There we go. And let me go ahead and try it again. There we go. And let's go right here. And we are streaming live and we're ready to go. So, hey, everybody, welcome to our short health space. It's going to go, we're only 1 minute late. So, it's a 30-minute Twitter spaces where we touch on a certain subject. And I know a lot of my friends and followers have asked me a lot of questions about medical marijuana and some of the questions that are interesting. So I figure, you know what, Dr. Kumar, this is what you have this in your practice.
That's right. Been doing this ever since Florida legalized medical cannabis. Back in 2017.
And I mean, in the early days, they were like precise, like a little bit. I think they didn't quite know what else that they were gonna allow you to, because some of the symptoms, some of the medical condition, like they added more medical condition over the years. That's what I
Right.
was
Right.
trying to say.
Yeah. So the thing is this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk generally, so that this information will apply to people listening from anywhere in the world. And then we'll talk specifically about the US. And thirdly, we'll talk specifically about Florida. How about that? All right. So let's get started. So there are there's one resource that I want folks from across the world to take a look at, and that is the website called Cannabis Clinicians, or also called the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. It's the website to go to if people are looking for real, good, scientific, unbiased non-political information about medical cannabis. Okay, so what does that mean? So this is a group of physicians from around the world, and by the way, I'm a member too, um, who who put out tons of information, and this is available free, free for the public. So if you go to cannabisclinicians.org and you look at resources, under resources, you've got a bunch of good material. The main material that you can look into are a bunch of videos. And this is really amazing. I mean, there's so much of in depth information that it will really help people understand whether you are a clinician or a patient or a caregiver. It will really throw a lot of information that you can use to kind of talk to your physicians, your politicians, your policymakers, and so on and so forth. So people can point to this particular website, and I really love this website. So this is something that should be shared across the world. People should have access to this. So the second question is, let's talk a
I
little bit
pinned it to
about.
the nest, by the way, that website for everybody. So if you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
bookmark that to read later, that would be great.
yeah. So go under resources. There are tons of good information, and physicians can become members of this. They get CME credits when they sign up for their educational platform, and so on and so forth. You really can get a lot of good education online. So you really don't have to do much except acquire that information. So the second thing that we need to really talk about is the difference between medical cannabis and the regular cannabis people get off the streets. The problem in the U.S. is that, number one, cannabis has been used forever, across history, starting from India, the Middle East, South America, among the American Indian. We've had cannabis forever. So it became illegal, um, several decades ago in the U.S. To a point where it was criminalized. Even small possession of small amounts of medical cannabis would end you up in jail. But over the past few years, I think there's been push from the ground up, basically people demanding the knowing, the public knowing what the benefits of medical cannabis or the cannabis was, that they started pushing policymakers to change the laws. So having said that, medical cannabis is heavily regulated in the US, heavily regulated, which means that um, that we know exactly what's in those stuff that people get when they go buy medical cannabis. They're able to quantify the amount of CBD that there is, the amount of THC there is. There's a dose to it, and we as clinicians are beginning to understand, what the ability of this medical cannabis is in among a whole spectrum of patients. So when we are talking about medical cannabis, we understand CBD and THC, but the fact is there are tons of these compounds in each strain of the medical cannabis plant. We are able to identify just a handful of them chemically. But the active component is not only THC and CBD, but also what we call as terpenes and polyphenols. So, what does that mean? When you go buy wine at the liquor store, right, you don't go ask for alcohol, right? Or you don't ask for just any kind of wine. So, what differentiates one kind of wine from another wine? It is not just the alcohol. The alcohol content may be the same in several uh, parts of wine, but what differentiates each brand of wine from the next is their polyphenols and their terpene component. And so the therapeutic properties of medical or cannabis comes from not just the THC, not just the CBD, but it's the cocktail effect of what's around these molecules, which means the terpenes have an active role in how effective these things are. The polyphenol, the different kinds of polyphenols that is unique to each strain, has its own therapeutic properties when it's mixed up with the right proportion of THC and CBD. So, so when people have tried to purify THC and purify CBD, the effect is not the same as when you use the natural product, which means when you have the presence of polyphenols and terpenes and so on and so forth, all the other chemicals, that is what makes each strain of medical cannabis unique. Now, when people buy cannabis off the streets, we really don't know what they contain, how much they contain. We don't know how many contaminants there are. Even because now I heard that it's being mixed with fentanyl and whatever other dangerous substances there is. So it behooves on clinicians to educate patients on how different this is, um, in terms of medical cannabis. So if somebody needs cannabis, I would urge them, go the legal route. It's going to be safe. You're going to be under the care of a physician. You can adjust the dose. You can play with the strains, and you can get the full therapeutic benefit of whatever benefits that each person is looking for. And trust me, when it comes to the most perfect form of personalized care, you cannot beat medical cannabis, because one strain of medical cannabis that can work for one particular patient situation may not work for the next patient, because his needs are completely different. So it's by trial and error that you figure out what type of medical cannabis that will benefit you the most and what doesn't. So, two things that I tell my patients: one is the dose, and the second is the type of or the strain of medical cannabis that you folks get, or the mixture that people get. So, the route of administration has very little to do with efficacy. You understand? So people have the habit of inhaling medical cannabis or cannabis. They want the smokables, they want the inhalers. But in my mind, it also comes in as edibles, sublinguals, tablets, creams, and lotions and ointments. So those are the routes of administration. So my advice to most patients is, if you can help it, do not smoke this, because it contains chemicals that have to be created to make the THC and whatever medical cannabis volatile. So why would anybody want to put anything into their lungs? Especially when you've had a history of smoking, and so since we don't know the long term effects of medical cannabis smoke in the lungs, why take that risk when you can get the same benefit by utilizing it as a sublingual drop, or even edibles? So that is my standard recommendation to patients. So no matter where you are, if you can help it, avoid the smokables. But I think it's more of a psychological thing than anything else, that people are so used to the smokable part of cannabis that they uh, kind of force our hand in prescribing the smokable form of medical cannabis. So that is the general statement that I wanted to make, that can apply to people anywhere in the world. So what are the contraindications? Where would I not recommend cannabis of any kind, whether it's legal, illegal, or whatever? Listen, if a woman is pregnant or breastfeeding, please stay away. You don't want to hurt your baby. You have a developing brain going on. You have no idea the kind of damage that's being caused to the growing infant. So please, if you are pregnant or you're breastfeeding, please stay away. And relative contraindication, anybody in their growing years, stay away from cannabis, please. I mean, I see teenagers, smoking away, inhaling medical cannabis, unless there's a strong medical indication. Like, for example, intractable epilepsy, where the medical cannabis can make a difference in terms of how well the epilepsy is controlled. Unless there's a very strong medical need for cannabis, if you have a brain that is growing, which is in the teenage years and early adulthood, I would say, 19, 20, 21, please stay away. If you can get by with other stuff, please do. You do not want to create um, permanent damage to the brain, sort of permanent damage to the brain at that formative years. So that's a word of precaution. So I'm done with the general part. So this is going to apply to people anywhere in the world. So let's talk specifically about Florida. Now, Florida legalized medical cannabis in 2017, and the website that I would urge people to go in and take a look at is knowthefactsmmj.com. And this is a website that was created by the Florida Department of Health, Office of Medical Marijuana Use. Now, we as physicians in Florida are limited to the kind of patients that we can recommend medical cannabis to. So I'm using the words very carefully. A recommendation. We recommend medical cannabis. So when folks get a medical marijuana card through a physician, it's a recommendation. It is a recommendation. So it's not a prescription. So it's a recommendation that we offer based on the medical need of the patient. So, what are the criteria that we need to use before a patient comes in and signs up with us? Number one, they need to have a Florida identification card. Maybe either a permanent resident of Florida or even a seasonal resident. As long as there's some evidence showing proof of residency in the state of Florida, they're eligible to whatever extent that they stay in Florida. And this particular website will give a bunch of ways of proving that point. Number two, patients need to have um, um, a qualifying condition. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? So, what are the qualified conditions in the state of Florida? I'm not talking about California or anywhere else where cannabis is recreational. I'm confining my discussion because I'm a Florida physician. I'm going to talk just about Florida. So, there are limited number of medical conditions that will qualify for somebody to get medical cannabis. So, I have patients who come in with all kinds of, um, I should say, excuses, which sometimes are kind of ridiculous. So we literally have to turn them down. So, what are the conditions? And all this information is available on the Florida medical cannabis website. So, cancer is one of them. So, as a cancer doc, I find it incredibly helpful for a bunch of my cancer patients who are undergoing chemo and radiation. The only time, and this is a caution that I want cancer patients to understand, when patients are on any form of immunotherapy, please be cautious because we have new data showing that medical cannabis can actually interfere with the immunotherapy helping fighting cancer. So please talk to your oncologist before you get on medical cannabis, and be very specific. It is immunotherapy, not chemotherapy medications. It's immunotherapy. But just be aware of that fact because otherwise, if you're on regular chemotherapy, medical cannabis has the huge benefits in terms of quality of life. Having said that, and since we are focused on quality of life for cancer patients, I also want people to understand that when you go to the Society of Cannabis Clinicians and you look at those videos under resources, you'll bump into a video about cannabis and cancer. Now, what was stunning about some of that information that I found and doing my research on that is in Israel, patients with what are called glioblastoma of the brain, it's a deadly cancer of the brain, inflammatory breast cancers and prostate cancers and colorectal cancers. These cancer cells from each individual patient is taken, it's harvested and cultured, and different strains of cannabis are used against each sample of cancer cells, and they find out that there are some strains of cannabis that have cancer kill on specific cancers much better than the available chemo. Now that was mind blowing. So not only is medical cannabis helpful for improving the quality of life for cancer patients. But if you look at the science, there may be a way of actually using cannabis as a therapeutic agent. Now, we do not have that capability here in the US, but at least in Israel, it is available today. Okay. So when I talk to my cancer patients, my hope is that maybe there's a small chance that the cannabis may not only improve their quality of life, but there is a small chance that it may actually help fight cancer. Now, again, there's no way of proving it, disproving it, but all I know is my patients feel better, and their quality of life is better. They stop losing weight. They start functioning better. In fact, the reason I got into medical cannabis, and I was like any other physician. And by the way, most physicians continue to be skeptical about medical cannabis. So if you look at the registry or the number of physicians who are able to recommend medical cannabis in the state of Florida, it's a minuscule amount when compared to the number of physicians in the state of Florida. So we have a long way to go to educate physicians about the simple process of being able to recommend cannabis for the patients. It's a stepwise process that people have to go through. It takes a little bit of time, energy, and effort, but it's not much. It is doable. But the kind of service that you will provide to your patients is truly amazing. So, but anyway, so because of my mother-in-law who had breast cancer and who that I helped get medical cannabis, and she was in California in 2017, where we had access to cannabis. Her quality of life was so good that she could get at least another 2 years of quality life before she passed away. So that's a real personal story, and that's what really got me going on medical cannabis, and that's the reason I'm so passionate about this whole process of cannabis. Anyway, so what are the other qualifying conditions? Epilepsy is one. Again, not the regular kind that gets help with a little bit of anti-epileptic medications. This is for those with difficult to control epilepsy. Glaucoma is the third one. HIV/AIDS, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, PTSD, and ALS. Now, pain. We get calls for pain management and medical cannabis. Now, pain is not one of the direct qualifying conditions for medical cannabis. There is usually something behind it, whether it's cancer or Parkinson's or some form of PTSD, trauma, motor vehicle accident, any of those things. So non-malignant pain, it is something that we have to justify based on the other qualifying conditions. So pain per se is not a direct indication for medical cannabis. So that is something that we make clear for our patients. Um, so how do they apply for the card? Number one, they have to meet these two criteria. One is being a resident of Florida. Number two, having a medical qualification. Um, and then folks have to send off a $75 fee to the state of Florida, and within a day or less than a day or less than an hour, you can get your qualifications. If you have dotted your I's and crossed your T's, you should be able to get to the dispensary to get your first uh, medical cannabis like within a day. So it used to take 3 months from the time that people apply to the state and to the time that they were able to go get the medical cannabis. Now it's like a matter of minutes to hours. So we have come a long way in terms of how efficiently this whole process has been. And so once patients come to us, so what's the stepwise process? They call for an appointment, they come in, they provide us proof of residency, we look at their medical records, we qualify them, and as soon as the form or the application form goes to the state of Florida, I get a signal from my front desk saying that the patient has been approved. And that's when I go in and put in the order online on a portal of the medical cannabis website. So once I place the order, so what am I ordering? I can order route of administration, whether it's low THC or medical marijuana. Okay, low THC is basically CBD with a small amount of THC in it. So we are also allowed to prescribe the smokables, and there's a limit to how much they get per month. 35 days is 2.5 ounces every 35 days. And so the patients have to come in and sign off on a consent form every 6 months. But the order that I write is good for 270 days each time that they come in. So if there's any changes, they call us. They run out of this or that, we can up the dose, tweak the dose. Um, but then I tell my patients, you know, be careful. Start slow, start small, build up the dose. If you feel that it's not working, take the stuff back to the dispensary, wherever you got it, get it from, and switch things around. It'll probably take about 2 or 3 attempts before you get the right stuff for your particular condition. And also instruct your patients, when they go to the cannabis dispensary, give them a list of what your needs are. You can't sleep, you want to gain weight, you want to lose weight, you want to stop having nausea, you have your Parkinson's disease, whatever. Make a list of what your needs are. So that way the dispensary can make a good decision on what fits you the best. I mean, I'll tell you one example that that really makes sense. So I had a patient who actually worked at nights. She was a handler for the 911 call. And so when she went to the medical cannabis dispensary, they just gave her stuff that puts people to sleep at night. And since she didn't discuss that, guess what? She didn't understand why she was so sleepy at night. So please be careful. Okay, when you go and make sure you are very crystal clear on what your needs are. You want to be able to sleep at night or stay awake at night. Whatever it is, make sure that the dispensary understands what your needs are, so that way you can be assured that you get the right things and not having to kind of screw up your life. So that's that. Also, in the state of Florida, we know a lot of patients do not, or because of their disability, they can't get to the dispensary. You can have your caregiver carry a caregiver card, so that way the caregiver can be your representative when they go pick up the medical cannabis, um, or just make sure that also not only go to the dispensary, but you can also have it delivered to your home, with the right identification in the right address. The dispensaries can deliver it to your home. I think there's an extra charge for it, but what I tell my patients is go to the dispensary at least for the first 1 or 2 times, and then once you know what's working and what's not working, then you can make a decision. Once you know what's working, then you can just repeat the same thing and you can have that delivered, so you don't have to travel.
I didn't know about that. That's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
That's a nice service.
yeah.
We have Bit Buds. I want to go ahead and let Bit Buds grab the mic. Because this is a 30-minute space. So Bit Buds, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, Tonya. It's been nice listening in and good to jump into something that's actually quite different from the NFT space, what we're usually talking about, and music stuff. So happy to be here. Um, I did have a little couple of questions for the doc, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, nice to meet you. So I'm from the UK. I've been following the cannabis industry for quite some time. Um, Probably since when the basically legalization or
Mm-hmm.
decriminalization happened from around 2009, I think
Mm-hmm.
2012 time. It was quite big. Um, ba- Basically, my questions. I mean, I'm seeing the trends happening. A lot of legalization happening across, like Israel is quite liberal towards cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
I think Switzerland is quite very liberal. Germany as well. In Europe, it's just coming. I think we're quite behind in Europe, but I think that maybe they just took a back step and let the USA model flourish. I think you lot are quite ahead in the cannabis industry. Obviously, looking at California, they've had cannabis smoking on the beach for quite some time.
Yeah,
So, and it's been quite openly done as well. You know,
yeah,
in UK, we're quite a bit more conservative. It's a bit more hidden. It's still even if people do smoke, they'll smell it in the street and say, "Oh, what's that funny smell we're smelling around?" You know.
yeah.
But what do you feel with regards to like the new strains of cannabis? I mean, going toward like especially like the hybrids, the the ones that are like really crossbred to be super strong, super THC. I mean, they definitely must have medical properties, and especially the high concentrate oils and waxes. But obviously, everything in moderation at the same time. But what's your opinion on those high concentrate? Sort of maybe they've been coming around in the last 5, 6 to 7 years. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
please.
Sure. So the thing is this. So as medical cannabis clinicians, what we do is we actually prescribe the dose in milligrams of THC and CBD. You hear that? So, 100 milligrams a day of THC, 100 milligrams a day of CBD. So no matter what the concentration is, doesn't matter. You still get your 100, whatever amount of in milligrams of THC and CBD, because those are the only two things that we can weigh and quantify and prescribe. So if somebody comes in and tells me that 100 milligrams of THC under whatever concentration, doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter the concentration. It's the total amount per
Yes.
dose. So if I say 100 milligrams of THC and the patient comes back and says, "Doc, I tried it. It works a little bit, but not enough." Then I say, "Okay, let's go to 120 milligrams." You see? So the efficacy of medical cannabis, no matter what the concentration is dependent on the terpenes and the polyphenols around those molecules. People obsess about the amount of THC and the amount of CBD that there is, but I think the specific strains that are coming out and the way they are acting different for different indications is not just the concentration of THC and CBD. Those
Yes.
are the only things that we can name, easily. But
Yes.
the effectiveness is what's around each molecule, the polyphenols and the terpenes. It's just like wine, right? You can
Right.
buy a bottle of scotch, whatever, 20-30% of alcohol, or you can buy 5%. So if you're after alcohol, that doesn't matter, right?
Yes.
But if you're tasting wine, why is a 5% alcohol wine from France different from a 5% alcohol wine from England?
Yes.
Because the taste is
Yes.
different, the effects are different, whatever. It's based on those other molecules. So that's what we shouldn't forget. And,
Actually,
and,
it's yeah. Sorry, God.
and the therapeutic benefits comes from a combination of these two ingredients, CBD and THC, plus a significant extent from the terpenes and the polyphenols, a significant extent that we can't really quantify, except by doing clinical trials and saying, okay, this particular strain is good for this, and this particular strain is good for that. But again, our research in the US is so sloppy right now because, again, I forgot to mention this. It's still illegal in the eyes of the federal government. So, and the only folks who are allowed to do research on medical cannabis is the federal government. You see that? So it's a catch 22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So we are left up to the state to figure out our own way. So when I'm prescribing or recommending medical cannabis, it's under state law, you know, and we have no access to any research. I mean, we're literally scrambling. So that's the reason, when I signed up with the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, I mean, it was so heartening to find other colleagues from around the world who are sharing their knowledge and their research on that platform that we can all learn. So did that answer the question, by the way?
Yes. Do you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes, I do. I do.
Yes. So sometimes I am muting, and I just it's nice that you actually, funnily enough, just coincidence, you mentioned about the terpenes, and I actually just found a nice chart. It's like a pie chart. I'm gonna
Yeah.
actually pin it up here because it might be interesting for, well, you might already know about it anyway,
Awesome.
but so it does actually express about the different terpene profiles, and it doesn't say which flavors, but you could probably find that out. But it does
Yeah.
mention about have different therapeutic benefits,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, there is a lot of research to keep on with, and
Yeah.
especially coming out with the Delta 8 THC now. I know I
Yeah.
have a buddy he's actually in Florida, and he
Oh,
said that the Delta 8 is medical and the Delta 9 is still
Yeah,
what they haven't really regulated at the moment.
yeah,
But for some reason, there is a molecule which has been taken out from the delta 8. Um,
yeah,
I still need to figure it all out, but it would be interesting to really go forward with this
yeah,
in the future times. Yeah,
yeah.
it's nice
So,
to
well,
see.
I can give you one additional piece of information on the business side of medical cannabis in the state of Florida. So when people apply, because once this became legal, I was getting 4 or 5 phone calls a day saying, "Oh, Kumar, let's open up a medical cannabis dispensary." What my answer was? You have $200 million. Don't call me.
Yes.
Because the way the licenses are being handed out in the state of Florida is a vertical, which means each company that has a medical cannabis license has to be responsible, in fact, have full control from the seed to the dispensary stage and anything in
Yes.
between. Okay.
Right.
You can't have a grower on one side under one company, a distributor on one side, a quality control on one side. No, this has to be integrated vertically across the board to an extent where if it's easy to track a source of cannabis from any patient to the exact plant and the dispensary that it came out of, which company uh, originated that particular medical cannabis. It is so
Right.
precise because that's how they're being tracked.
Now, is it down to the company? So does that mean that each company will have their own framework, which will have to be compliant with the government checking, and the right authorities will come and check your process maybe every
Absolute
3 to 6 months? But
up and down, up and
so,
down
so what would
across the
stop
vertical.
what would stop someone coming in and disrupting the industry, let's say, and developing a sort of a framework, maybe a blockchain framework, where it would be a trustless supply chain tracing from seed to shop, basically to retail? And do you think the government would maybe endorse something like that, or do they want to keep it quite closed?
No, listen, this is a very, very closed industry. It's a very well guarded. The
Yes.
the entry into this industry is extremely hard, especially at this point in time, because these guys are in their fortresses and they're strengthening it every day. There's so much of money being poured in. The rules and regulations are so tight that it's going to be extremely hard. For example, there's a push in Tallahassee, our capital, to make cannabis recreational. I don't see that happening, my friend. I don't see that happening over at least the next few years or several years, because if medical or cannabis becomes recreational, there's actually no room for any of these companies to exist.
Yes, it just goes
Okay.
out into the public straight
Yeah, it will
away.
go
It
to the
becomes
and
decentralized in essence. Yes.
yeah, no, it becomes decentralized, it becomes democratic. I mean, if
Democratic.
folks
Yes.
are allowed to grow their own cannabis, this industry is done.
Yes.
In Vermont, that they allow people to grow their own plants
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah,
They're,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing great in Vermont. Everyone's like, there's a lot of they tax it, so I think there's a lot of funding for schools and stuff. It's interesting how Vermont's doing it.
yeah. Again, the progressive states, I think, will be way ahead. And that's the reason California was one of the first few states that made cannabis recreational. I mean, there's still room, but automatically, once it became recreational, the price of cannabis has really crashed. Because of not
Yes.
only adequate supply, but the demand for the medical kind has gone down. So now it's easily available. The prices are within reason. But right now, here in the state of Florida, it's a very tightly regulated market. The demand is screamingly high. The supply is limited, which is the reason that the prices are high. And so that's how the industry wants it that way. You see? You see
Nice.
that?
Yes. Very, 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 very good explanation, really, of how it's being guarded.
Yeah.
It will be funny to see. It will be nice to see how it plays out. Just a bit of background on. I did mention about Germany.
Yeah.
Malta recently legalized for medical, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, Poland and Austria, you can walk into a club with cannabis in your pocket, no problem, as long as it's up to 5 grams. I
Yeah.
think they have a grey area law where you're allowed to grow cannabis for its floral properties, as in you can have it as a house decoration, for the smell. But as soon as you sort of grow it can grow buds, but as soon as you chop buds for preparation for retail, that's
Yeah.
when the process becomes illegal. But there's a fine line between you chopping a bit of your plant and drying it for your personal consumption. So
Yeah.
I think their system does work in a way, because it does punish you for sort of starting up, some drug dealing establishment, let's say. But on the other hand, they are understanding that people are using this. It's not that bad of a. I mean, there's not causing any disruptions or any problems, as long as people are being,
Yeah.
good humans about it, not destroying. Alcohol has way more negative effects
Hey,
on
listen,
society.
Tanya, did you put that up on the cost savings for the medical complex with medical cannabis being legal?
Yeah, I think I shared it. I mean, it should be
Yeah.
the first
So
tweet.
one of the things that we posted also is the fact that when the medical cannabis became available, that automatically the need for prescription medications have gone down, and this is based on a population study. So can you imagine, the amount of damage that's being done to big pharma with the legalization of medical cannabis? So what I tell people is we are replacing big pharma with big cannabis.
and
uh,
and holistics, really, because cannabis. I know I'm a very old heritage Indian, Gujarati, so have
oh
a
really?
very, very um, wide knowledge of the ancient yoga
Yes,
and
sir.
meditation and
Yeah.
the therapeutic benefits of cannabis. I mean, I don't know how it is for some people. Sometimes, yeah, you're knocked out from cannabis, but to be honest, if you can have a balance, there is always a need for balance with anything.
Yeah.
And it's good to have breaks as well, as a user of. Sometimes
Yeah.
we don't, as a recreational, we don't really measure in milligrams, we just go with the flow. But so there's not really, get high as you're going along with your social circles or wherever you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the same time, there's also the need for education behind it. I think the fact of it being illegal makes a person, like, from a social standpoint, want
Yeah.
to hide it away. Whereas
Yeah.
if you look at somewhere like Amsterdam, where there's just coffee shops everywhere,
Yeah.
like especially like young professionals, they're not so much afraid of hiding it, but at the same time they're getting on with their professional things while maybe in the coffee shop even.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. I mean, we are not that liberal yet. Hopefully, someday, common sense will prevail and our politicians will bend to the will of the people and allow a little bit more liberal, you know, policies and stuff like that that can really help the violent user of medical cannabis or cannabis. Hardly, hardly, somebody gets into trouble becoming violent after smoking pot. I mean, I haven't heard of any. So anyway, that's our take. I've got to run. I've got patients waiting. This was a fun
Thank you, Dr.
conversation.
Kumar. Before we let you go, how do we get a
Okay,
hold of
cool.
you?
Yeah, right. The easiest way is to connect with me through a text message. It's a Florida number. It's 772-253-335-2195. Um, you can check my website. It's called lifewellmd.com. And let's catch up next week. We'll find another fun topic to talk about.
Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week at 12:30 on
1:30.
Wednesday. I'm sorry, 1:30 on Wednesday. I'm having a moment here. 1:30 on Wednesday.
Thank you, Tanya.
But I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thanks, Tonya.
Bye. Bye, guys.